Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm running out of tea. This is an intellectual man asks Muslim all the right questions. This was a donation or request from Ameer, donated to the channel, bumped up all of his videos. If you'd like to donate, great. There's a thanks button, appreciate it. If not, hey, I'm going to continue to make videos. So we're going to break this down into two parts, a couple 18-minute videos, and let's start right now.
Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're here with your brother Mohammed Tawheed here at Guidance Avenue, and I am joined today with
Sebastian
and
Mohammed.
And I'm going to leave you to it, guys.
Sure.
Oh.
So the question that I was talking with my friends earlier,
Yeah.
unlike the Bible, which has got a lot of different versions to it, the Quran has always had the same text throughout history. So we also, along with that, bear in mind we were talking about if you follow, let's say, 90% of the teachings but you don't follow 10%, does that qualify you to be good in the eyes of God? So we were asking the question, every single person on the planet has a different language, because even though you can write something in the same script, there's 7 billion different interpretations of a language. So if I say the word water, for example, to you, it might mean completely different things to you. Let's say if you had a terrible accident in water, it means different thing to you as it does to me. And every single word can be like that in a language. So how is it possible to follow the exact teachings of the Quran if every single person has a slightly different interpretation of it? And that means that every single person has a slightly different interpretation of their belief.
Thank you very much. It's a brilliant question. It's actually a question that a lot of scholars in many different fields have actually grappled with. But the good thing about the Quran is that it actually gives us an instruction manual on how to deal with this issue. So it says in chapter 3, verse number 7, هو الذي أنزل عليه الكتاب منه آيات محكمات هن أم الكتاب. That he is the one who sent down the book with basically verses in it that are foundational verses, and these are the mother of the book, or the foundational verses of the book. وأخر متشابهات, and other verses which are ambiguous. فأما الذين في قلوبهم زيغ فيتبعون ما تشابه منه ابتغاء الفتنة وابتغاء تأويله وما يعلم تأويله إلا الله. Basically, it says that those who want to follow their own desire or the kind of corruptive elements, or try and create some kind of confusion, they will follow the ambiguous verses and make them as kind of foundational. So because they are open to interpretation, so it's clear that you can have more than one interpretation. These individuals will try and use those verses as if they are foundational verses. So let's give you some live examples, right? In the history of Islam, there has never been a controversy surrounding the fact that God is one, for example. There's never been a theological controversy surrounding that. In the Quran, it's very clear, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, say He's God, the one and only. So there's never been a Muslim who's ever claimed to be a Muslim that has said that the Quran is anything that God is anything but one God. Same in chapter 48, in the final verse of that chapter, it says Muhammad Rasulullah, that Prophet Muhammad is the final messenger of Allah. So there's never been a controversy on that, if that makes sense. So in a nutshell, how do we kind of navigate from interpretation? And that which is clear is we look at the foundational verses of the scripture, and we basically try and make a theology out of that. Those ambiguous verses have to fit into the context of the foundational verses.
Yeah. Okay. So it's almost as if there's certain things that you don't need to argue about because they're very clear cut,
Yes.
and that you can look at for instruction on the things that are less clear.
Exactly.
Right. That's very interesting. Okay.
Makes sense. Okay.
I can't think of a better answer to that question. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, good.
Thanks.
Any other questions you have?
So what else have we talked about? Okay. So we talked about what was the particular the 41 different theologians. So we were talking about so after the Prophet there are different theologians throughout Islamic history. Yeah.
There's an internal sort of dispute over that.
Yeah. So we were essentially talking about people who are not of God, but they obviously they're religious and they've interpreted it. So what I asked was, God is perfect, right? And do we believe that human beings are perfect?
So we don't believe.
Yeah,
human
not
beings are
necessarily,
perfect.
right? So
say infallible. The prophets we believe are infallible.
Yes.
In the sense that they cannot be, they cannot commit major sins, or
Yeah.
nothing can interrupt the revelation.
Right.
They're not perfect in the same
But
way.
other human beings aren't perfect, and that means that logically anything that comes from these human beings also cannot be perfect, including any religious interpretations or arguments, everything from, you know, straight theology to jurisprudence. So the question that I have is, when you're not following the hadith or the Quran or any other, or the word of God or a prophet, for example, when it's a theologian, you are allowed to interpret it. Would that be correct? So you can take it, you can argue with a theologian, not in the same way that you would argue with the word of the Quran.
Yeah, exactly. So a theologian's verdict, so to speak, is not binding on every individual.
Right.
So you're open to kind of challenge a theologian and ask them why they've come to that conclusion, because they could have very well interpreted the text of the Quran in an incorrect way.
Yes.
So from that perspective, that's where we have discussion. But what from like a layman's perspective or someone who's new to Islam, really the way this would kind of actualize in reality is you would follow that which you feel is most correct, yeah, and you would not be judged for that which you get wrong, because at the end of the day you have a limited ability to do things in this world. So it's not if you are not able to get the correct interpretation of every single, let's say, jurisprudic situation, it doesn't mean to say that now you're going to be punished for that, because that would be an unfair thing to do. And that's why God, there's you could say a maxim in Islam, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها, that God does not overburden a soul with more than it can handle. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
But if I were to ask you now, I mean, would you accept, I mean, what's your position on God? Would you accept that there is a God actually that created the universe and is maintaining the universe, or this idea of an entity that's creating and maintaining the universe, fashioning everything that's been created, etc., etc.?
I err on the side of there would have to be a creator.
Yeah.
I wasn't raised
Yeah.
like that. It's just
Yeah.
the kind of conclusion that I reached. I'm not sure whether it would be a guy with a beard in the sky, like a painting.
Yeah, of course, I would agree with that. I mean, I don't think it would be a guy.
Yeah.
I mean, from an Islamic perspective, the Quran says, لا تدركه الأبصار وهو يدرك الأبصار, that vision cannot encapsulate God, and He encapsulates all vision. And it says in chapter 42, verse number 11, that ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير, that there's nothing like Him at all, and He is the all-seeing, all-hearing. So in other words, any image that we've gotten from, let's say, the Western media or any other media, or any image, generally speaking, that we've got from what constitutes God, would not be a correct image. Anything you can
Including
imagine.
your imagination.
Yeah, including your imagination.
So you can't actually conceive of what God would physically look like because it's not
Yes,
possible.
exactly. It's not possible to conceive what God looks like, based on those verses in the Quran. لا تدركه الأبصار وهو يدرك الأبصار, that vision cannot encapsulate Him, but He encapsulates all vision. Yeah, and the same thing, ليس كمثله شيء. So our perception of God, or our idea of God, is not a God which has basically been made into a human being or any kind of creation. So this is called anthropomorphism. So we don't believe in anthropomorphized God. We don't believe in a Jesus type God. We would say that Jesus Christ is a human being, right? And it's interesting to find that throughout history you'll find that there have been anthropomorphized versions of God, from Hercules to Zeus to Jesus. All of them have something in common. In the case of Hercules and Jesus, is that they were son of God, or they were son of a higher God, and obviously God themselves, in a sense. In the case of Jesus, I mean, once again, they're all anthropomorphized. We will say that our conception of God is a non-anthropomorphized God, that which cannot reach human being in terms of imagination. And so, from that perspective, we would say that God, you cannot imagine God. Anything you can imagine is not God.
Right. You're just incapable of. There's no way you could get round it, or like you're not imagining it right. We just lack the, if you like, the processing power or the ability to do it in the first place.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So that's one thing. So we can't imagine.
I would believe that your eyes are incapable of truly appreciating what a God would look like. But I think that it would be possible to see a God, or not a God, but to see God, if God were willing to show you a version that you could handle, which would probably be a human. You might not see the visuals like this. Oh yeah, he had a beard. you know, he was wearing a top hat, he had a British accent. No, it's not going to be like that, but it might be an image that was somewhat nondescript, meaning you saw a outline of an image. Maybe you heard, did I say an outline of an image? I don't know how I said that. Where you wouldn't get details, but there would be enough to where you would hear it and immediately know, yep, I know exactly what I'm dealing with right now. Possible, maybe not.
God, that's one thing. God is all-powerful. Our conception of God is as follows. God is an all-powerful entity which has created all that exists, continues to maintain it, and creates the human being, allowed him to basically exist. Let me ask you guys a question. Let's open this up a little bit. Let me ask you, I was thinking about this. I tried this with a little bit of, with some people before, but let me try it again, yeah? I want you to imagine the following, Sebastian, okay? Imagine when you go to sleep, yeah? You wake up in your bed, isn't it? I wake up, I go to sleep, I wake up in my bed, where I slept initially. But I want you to imagine the following example, okay? I want you to imagine that you go to sleep, wherever you go to sleep, and you wake up and you find yourself on a train, yeah? Now I want you to answer the following question. What would you ask? What's the first thing you'd ask yourself?
How did I get here?
Yeah.
How did I get here? What else would you ask?
Who put me here?
Who put you here? What else would you ask?
Where's the train going?
Okay, thank you very much. Now let me...
This is what I would say. Where the hell am I? How the hell did I get here? Am I being kidnapped? That would probably be my first... Am I on a train? Who kidnapped me and put me on a train? I gotta say this. They're clearly somebody who cares about the environment. Because wherever they're going, they thought, you know, a train... I mean, there's not as many stops. You don't have to refill gas, charge up the battery if it was a electric car. I don't have to listen to this dummy say he has to go to the bathroom all the time. I don't have to, every time we pass a gas station, he goes, oh, can you go get those giant chewy sweet tarts? No, we can't. You're being kidnapped. How did I get to being kidnapped on a train? What?
Tell you something, right? What would you do if you woke up on the train and you saw people, you know, just living life, and you just started doing what they do? And you had these questions that you wanted to ask, how did I get here, where am I going, all these things, but you just suppressed them. What would you say of a person who suppresses these questions?
I'd say they become unhappy at some point. They wouldn't be able to suppress it any longer.
That's a good point. Would you also say that that person is critical or uncritical in their being, in their existential being?
Completely uncritical.
Uncritical. Is it justified to be uncritical in that way?
Absolutely not.
Okay, in the parable of the train is the parable of life. We woke up to a life, we woke up to a being here in this world. But we see now the Western, not to kind of knock Western culture, but I'm just saying that it's promoted nowadays that we shouldn't really think about these ultimate questions. We're on the train of life. We don't know whether we know one thing, we're going to die. We're on the train of life. We woke up and we're distracted by everything around us. But the questions which are most fundamental to our existential being, how did I get here? Where am I going? Who am I? Where am I? All of these questions that you asked yourself, these questions are
these questions, is he going to say these questions are answered? I got a feeling that's what he's going to say.
These questions are not being asked. And I urge everyone, including yourself, to ask these questions. So if I ask you, how did I get here? That question, if we apply it to the context of Speaker's Corner of London, not just Speaker's Corner of London, let's just say to the world that we live in. How did you get here?
Well, his mom met his dad. And they got naughty. 9 months later, the stork arrived with a new baby. Right? Isn't that how it works?
the atheistic response is you got here in a way which we can't really understand. It could be the multiverse, it could be that nothing created something, it could be, like Krauss actually says, a universe from nothing. That's just, for me, it's an unsatisfactory response. How did we get here? Well, you know, don't worry about it too much, don't think about it, you know. What are we doing here? You make your own purpose, my friend. No, I mean, it doesn't seem that logical, does it? It doesn't follow. If you are on the train, you would not accept that particular logic. So I will ask you the question. What makes the best? Does it make sense to say? Does it make sense to say? How did you get here? You were created by an all-knowing entity. What you're doing here, that all-knowing entity has assigned and fixed a purpose for you. And where are you going? You're going to die. And there is something that's going to happen after death. Let me tell you something. Do you know the human experience?
But I disagree. If it assigned something to you, then that means that we don't have free will. If this is my task, this is my... Now, unless you're putting it in terms of it's what you're good at. You know, like some people are just good at business. Some people are good at sports. Some people are good at, you know, and if you're saying it that way, you have a gift, a talent, something like that, then that makes a little more sense.
A lot of people say, well, how can you prove that there's going to be something that happens after death? All we can know is that which we can empirically justify. I say I disagree with that. When we go to sleep and we close our eyes and we dream, yeah, dreaming is an experience that most human beings have experienced, which has no sensual reaction. You don't open your eyes, but you still see. You don't need to try and hear someone physically saying that, but you still hear. Dreaming, and this is why Freud, by the way, he wrote a book on dreaming. It's a really interesting human experience. The human experience has shown us when we are in the state of unconsciousness, we can still have realities. And dreaming is an ample example of that reality. What we're saying is this: when you lose overall consciousness, when you're dead, and everyone will die, yeah? When you lose overall consciousness, it won't be the case that things will stop. We say that there will be a reality that you will then experience, just like a dream. But it's more real than a dream, and it will be more prolonged than just a dream. And that reality will be a metaphysical reality that the entity that we discussed before, that created you, will assign for you, will create for you, will allow for you to have. And this is the whole idea of the Day of Judgment, heaven, hell, all of that is there. I'm not saying these things are dreams, I'm saying these things are realities. But those realities don't depend upon the existential five senses, the being of a human being and five senses, these things. They can be rearranged. So here, does it make sense for us to say today that the reason why you're here is because you were created? What you're doing here is that you have a purpose. And your purpose is gonna extend to your after death experience. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
And does it make sense? Now look, I say for example, I'm an unbiased individual, yeah? I want to find out which is the correct religion. There are 6 major world religions. Honestly, yeah, I just want to find out which one is truth. Everyone is claiming to be right. I swear to God, it doesn't take that long to find out the answer. You know why? Of the 6 major world religions, only 2 are proselytizing. Only 2 religions actually attempt to have you as whatever they are. And that's Christianity and Islam. Judaism is not a proselytizing religion. Hinduism is not really a proselytizing religion. Sikhism is not really a proselytizing religion. And they're all regional religions.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're all religions which have backgrounds in some kind of, let's just say some mythology. And sometimes they'll be open about it. Like Hindus are very open about their mythology. And the mythology is very similar to Greek mythology, to be honest with you. Yeah? So here, we have 2 candidates. Islam and Christianity. For me, to narrow the gap, all I have to do is look at the basic theology. Forget about everything else. Just look at the basic theology. If I were to look at the basic theology of Christianity and Islam, I see that Christianity is a religion which talks about the Trinity, 3 in 1 and 1 in 3. That Jesus is God, that the Holy Spirit is God and the Father is God and all 3 are one. I would argue that this is a fundamentally flawed theology. And the idea that God is one is only really present in its purest and truest form, in its most logical form, in the religion of Islam. Based on that logic, if we accept the premise of revelation through human beings, it does make sense that God is one, and that there were a long line of prophets, which is the Islamic narrative, that there were a long line of prophets, starting with Adam up until the final prophet, which we call Muhammad, all of which testified that there's only one God worthy of worship. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So here, does it make sense, or would you accept that Islam therefore is, from a theological or philosophical perspective, the most rational recourse?
I mean, you've given me one example. I agree with you on that one. I think the Holy Trinity thing is very strange. In fact, the Catholic Church admits it themselves.
Yeah, and as you've mentioned before, another example is, in terms of preserved text, Islam has the only preserved text. Let me tell you something, I'll defy anyone. And by the way, I'm here every week, I'm here every week, and people can always challenge me on this. I say the following, I say that Islam is the only religion where there has not been a controversy among Muslim theologians on the truthfulness or on the preservation of the Quran. Everyone attests that the Quran that they have is the Quran that we have. So in other words, there's no controversy in the Quran. The only religion which has a logical theology, the only religion which has a preserved text, the only religion which makes a series of predictions, all of which actualize. The Quran makes a series of predictions about empires. I'm not sure if you've heard of this. For example, the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire were in a war. And the Quran makes a shockingly precise prediction that in 3 to 9 years, the Roman Empire will defeat the Persian Empire in a nearby close land. The Prophet makes predictions about the future, about where Islam will spread. He tells us Islam will spread to Egypt. He tells us Islam will spread to Syria, to Jordan, to Yemen, to India, to Pakistan, to all of the places where we find Islam. There has been a prediction from the Prophet or in the Quran that Islam will spread in these places. The Quran makes a series of predictions about the fact, for example, that the Muslims will occupy the Arabian Peninsula and that it will happen within a period of time. These predictions, from a probabilistic perspective, give us another layer of argument, another evidence base, which is really this, which is that it cannot be the case, right? I would argue it cannot be the case that all of these predictions from a probabilistic perspective are completely accurate. Look at all the other religions. There are false predictions in the Bible. There are false predictions in the biblical text. I can tell you some of them, but I don't want to waste a lot of my time. A lot of them are very well known. Even Jehovah's Witnesses, I was making this point before. 1977, they said the end of the world is going to take place. And then when it didn't happen, they called it the Great Disappointment. The point is, predictions...
They call it the Great Disappointment. I'm going to go ahead and pause this here, and we'll get back into part 2. Reminder, I have a thanks button. You can donate to the channel. If you can, that'd be great. If not, I get it. Times are hard. Still making videos, so feel free to show up, watch, enjoy. Since you're here, give it a thumbs up. That helps. Even if you don't like it, just give it a thumbs up anyways. It's a YouTube thing. And then subscribe to the channel. You're already watching videos. Just subscribe. Who cares? You can unsubscribe never. It's fine. So, until next time, have a good day. Have a good night.